Have you ever had a really bad day? A day where everything was just going wrong? Well, Paul was having one of those days. In fact, it had been one of those weeks or even months. He had been arrested. He was on a prison ship. There had been a storm. The storm destroyed the ship. He had to jump overboard and swim to shore in the middle of a storm. It was a bad experience. And then he was gathering firewood to build a fire to warm up everyone who was drenched and soaked from swimming from the shipwreck to shore. And as he threw in a bundle of firewood, a snake shot out of the fire, latched onto his arm, and bit him. And everyone could see that this was a poisonous viper. And Paul shook it off, and it fell back into the fire. Now, everyone knew that Paul had minutes to live. Soon his arm would start to swell. He would get dizzy. He would have to sit down, and within minutes he would be dead. But Paul went back and got some more firewood, and he came back and he threw more wood onto the fire. And the natives who had helped rescue the shipwrecked sailors and prisoners looked at Paul and said, "This guy must be a terrible, terrible person, because the viper was sent by the gods so that justice is served." And then when Paul didn't die, they said, no, he must be a very good person. The gods are protecting him. And Paul was honored. He was invited to the governor of the island's home. He was put up in this nice place and given food. And as he was there, he heard that the governor's father was very, very sick. And Paul asked if he could pray for him. And Paul went into the bedroom and he laid hands on the governor's father. And he asked Jesus to heal him. And God did. News spread like wildfire. Pretty soon, the governor's mansion was being inundated by all of the sick people, all of the diseased people on the island. And Paul laid hands on every single one of them and prayed for all of them. And they were all healed. And then Paul shared his faith. And when we get to heaven, we'll find out how many people were saved by a shipwreck. I bet we can all identify with Paul right now, just a little bit. Seems like it's been a pretty crazy month. In fact, social media is just deluged with all of these sarcastic, cynical comments about how 2020 is the worst year ever. I mean, Australia was on fire, Kobe Bryant passed away, coronavirus, like things are crazy. We feel like Paul on a ship being tossed back and forth. Maybe we feel like the ship has already sank and we're swimming for our lives. Maybe we feel like we've finally dragged ourselves onto shore and we've been bitten by a poisonous snake and we just want to throw the wood down and scream at God, "Why? What are you doing?" But what if we could be like Paul and just shake it off? What if instead of screaming, "Why?" we just shake it off and keep working in faith? Paul was an apostle. Paul knew he was destined to preach to Caesar. Paul had written and was going to write most of the New Testament, and he was gathering firewood? That was his job? Well, that was the job that God gave him on that freezing cold morning in the middle of a storm. And when the snake bit him, Paul shook it off and he went back and did his job. And that's what we're being called to do right now. Maybe your job is to teach those kids, or to go get groceries for the old person across the street. Maybe your job is to work from home and make phone calls or write reports. Maybe your job is to write that book you've always wanted to write, or to reach out and encourage somebody. I don't know what that job is, but if you ask God and you listen, He will tell you what firewood you're supposed to gather in this season of your life. And you might get bit by a snake. But be like Paul. Shake it off. Shake it off. That poison has no power over you. And after we choose to shake it off, to look up in faith and say, God's got this, to get back to work and pick up more firewood, after we do that, we're going to walk into a situation just like Paul, where someone says, my dad's sick. Would you pray for him? Sure, of course. And you're going to be able to heal others with your words, with your attitude, with your actions. And you're going to be able to share your faith. A long time ago, around the time of the Pilgrims, sometime around there when immigrants were coming from Europe to America, there was a group of Germans from Moravians, and they were Christians, and they were in the middle of the Atlantic, and there was a terrible, terrible storm. I mean, it was bad. Everyone thought they were going to die. The other passengers were like crying and praying and screaming and just panicking. The sailors, they thought that they were going to die as well. I mean, this storm was breaking up the ship. And the Moravians, the Christians from Germany, there were women and children, men and old men and wives, and it was just families. And they were totally fine. Not fazed at all. Miraculously, the ship did not sink. And when it was over, people came to that group and they were like, why were you not scared in the storm? And they looked at everyone else and they said, well, because we're Christians. And the people said, well, so are we. And the Moravian said, oh, good, then you understand, right? And the other Christian said, no, we don't understand. Why weren't you scared? And the Moravian said, well, we believe God will take care of us. And we believe that if we die, we'll see him in heaven. And if we don't, he'll take care of us. Like, it doesn't matter what happens to us. God is going to take care of us. We trust in him. You know, the righteous live by faith. All of these basic Christian principles that we all know changed the attitude of the Moravians and of Paul in the middle of their storm. So let's step into the beliefs that we say we have. Let's shake off the panic. Let's shake off the fear. Let's shake off those doubts that are telling us that things are terrible and they'll never get better. And let's go get some more firewood. God's got a job for us to do. And that viper, you don't have anything on us. God bless.